Welcome back. It's really great to have you with us today. Whether you're prepping for a big meeting or maybe catching up on the world of literary history, or you're just intensely curious about the dark, fascinating corners of criminal psychology, you're in exactly the right place.
You really are. We have a fantastic topic today.
We do. Today, we have a very specific mission. We are taking a deep dive into an absolute cornerstone of the mystery genre, a book that fundamentally rewired how we think about crime fiction and psychological thrillers.
The blueprint, really.
Exactly. The book is the A.B.C. Murders book by Agatha Christie.
It's a truly remarkable piece of literature. And we have a very rich stack of source material to guide us today.
Yeah, let's talk about what we're working with.
Right, so we're looking at the core text of the novel itself, which is quite unique in its structure. It's heavily driven by the personal first-person narrative of Captain Arthur Hastings.
Which we're used to.
Right, but then it also features these sudden, incredibly unsettling third-person accounts that they completely shift the perspective and follow our prime suspect.
It's so jarring when you first read it.
It is. And on top of that text, we have an illuminating supplementary essay by the renowned Christie biographer, Charles Osborne.
Which is great because it gives us some vital historical and literary context about how the book was received.
Exactly. It really grounds the discussion.
So our goal today is to figure out exactly how Agatha Christie essentially pioneered the whole serial killer trope way back in the 1930s.
Decades before true crime profiling documentaries made it this massive cultural obsession.
Decades. And she invented it only to completely subvert the very trope she just created.
Which is the genius of it.
Right. We're going to explore the psychology of the murderer, the contrasting psychology of the investigator, and how those famous little gray cells solve a puzzle that was specifically designed to hide a very targeted motive inside a seemingly random, chaotic pattern.
And we should probably lay down a ground rule right here at the start for you, the listener.
Good idea.
We are focusing purely on the text provided in our sources today. So no spoilers from outside television adaptations or movie versions.
Just a pure, unfiltered examination of the source material.
Right. We're looking at how an author from the 1930s laid down the absolute blueprint for the modern psychological thriller.
So let's jump right into the opening. It's June of 1935.
Setting the scene.
Yeah. Captain Arthur Hastings has just returned to England from his ranch in South America. He's been out there managing things through the global depression, and he decides his very first order of business in London is to visit his old friend.
The legendary retired Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot.
Naturally.
So Hastings arrives at Poirot's new flat, and he immediately notes that it's one of those highly modern, heavily geometric service flats in London.
Like everything is perfectly angled.
Exactly. Hastings actually teases him about the strict squareness of it. He makes this joke about whether the hens in this super modern place lay square eggs.
I always find Hastings' perspective so interesting because he's our surrogate, right? He notices things that seem trivial but actually tell us a lot about Poirot's state of mind.
Like the hair dye.
Yes, the hair dye. Hastings looks at Poirot, realizes the man doesn't seem to have aged a single day, and sees his hair is completely jet black.
Not a speck of gray.
Right. And Poirot, with immense pride, goes into his bedroom and brings out a bottle of hair tonic.
Reviv
it. And he explicitly claims it's not a dye. He says it's something that just brings back the natural tone.
Which is a hilarious rationalization.
And Hastings is just staring at him, utterly shocked, realizing Poirot is essentially dyeing his hair and lying to himself about it.
It's a very funny, very domestic moment between old friends. But it also establishes Poirot's extreme vanity and his absolute refusal to let time defeat him.
He wants to control everything.
Precisely. He's a man who insists on maintaining complete control over his environment and his appearance. And think about what that means for a detective.
Right, if he cares that much about the symmetry of his hair.
Imagine how much he cares about the micro details of a crime scene. His obsession with order is exactly what makes him capable of catching a killer who relies on disorder.
That makes a lot of sense. And it leads right into their conversation about crime, which feels almost like a meta-commentary by Christie.
It really does.
Because Hastings, who has a very melodramatic soul, starts talking about wanting a classic sensational crime.
He literally lists off all these classic tropes. A curiously twisted dagger, an American millionaire, a beautiful girl with auburn hair who's unjustly suspected.
Very Hollywood.
Very... But Poirot completely shuts that down.
He's not interested at all.
Not even a little. Poirot counters by saying his ideal crime is what he calls in time. Intimate, exactly. He paints this picture for Hastings. He says, imagine 4 people sitting down to play bridge. One person, the odd man out, is sitting in a chair by the fire.
Okay.
At the end of the evening, the man by the fire is found dead. One of the 4 players at the table went over and killed him while acting as the dummy in the card game.
And the other 3 were so focused on their cards they didn't even notice.
Right. And Poirot says, there would be a crime for you. Which of the 4 was it?
Wait, isn't that literally the exact plot of Cards on the Table?
Yes.
Charles Osborne points that out in his essay, doesn't he?
He does. Christie is basically using Poirot to outline her own future novel right there in the text.
That is so clever.
It is. And the irony for this specific deep dive is just staggering.
Because of what happens next.
Exactly. Poirot is sitting there waxing poetic about wanting a quiet, domestic, highly intellectual, closed-room puzzle.
And what is the universe about to hand him? The exact opposite.
He is about to face a public, flashy, geographically sprawling, seemingly random serial killer who operates out in the wide open.
And it all starts with a single letter.
The ABC letter.
Right. Poirot receives this note. It's printed on thick white notepaper with a WC1 London postmark.
And it just taunts him.
It really does. It says, you fancy yourself, don't you, at solving mysteries that are too difficult for our poor, thick-headed British police.
Let us see, Mr. Clever Poirot, just how clever you can be.
The arrogance is off the charts. It tells him to look out for Andover on the 21st of the month. And it's signed, simply, A.B.C.
The reactions to this letter are really what set the stakes for the whole narrative.
Because Poirot takes it to the police, right?
He shows it to Chief Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, and Japp dismisses it completely. He thinks it's a stupid hoax from a crank.
Which, to be fair, he points out that Scotland Yard gets dozens of letters like that every single day.
True. From a bureaucratic standpoint, Japp is just playing the odds.
But Poirot is deeply uneasy. Hastings even asks him if it's just instinct, and Poirot flat out rejects that word.
He hates the word instinct.
He does. He says it's not magic. It's his knowledge and his exact experience telling him that something about this specific letter is fundamentally wrong.
He senses the immense ego and the dangerous conceit of the writer.
Right. He's basically arguing that those gut feelings we all get are actually just the result of the brain noticing anomalies and patterns faster than the conscious mind can articulate them.
Subconscious processing.
Exactly. He tells Hastings a madman is to be taken seriously. A madman is a very dangerous thing.
And his subconscious processing is dead right. Because on the 21st of June, the theoretical challenge turns into a very real, very brutal reality in a town called Andover.
The first murder.
A is for Andover. Alice Asher is found murdered.
Tell us about Alice.
She's a nearly 60-year-old woman who runs a tiny, somewhat sordid little tobacco and newspaper shop.
Not a glamorous victim at all.
Not at all. It's a gritty scene. She's found bludgeoned to death, struck heavily on the back of the head, likely while she was reaching up to get a packet of Player's cigarettes from a shelf.
It's just a brutal, intimate, yet completely senseless crime. But the local police inspector mentions a detail that changes absolutely everything.
The guide.
There was a railway guide left face down on the counter, open to the page for Andover.
And not just any railway guide. An ABC guide.
We should definitely pause here because to a modern listener, an ABC guide might sound abstract. Like, what is that?
Right. It's not just a generic map.
In the 1930s, this was a thick, yellow, paperback railway timetable that almost every household or business had. It listed all the train stations alphabetically. It was a ubiquitous, everyday object.
Exactly. You'd see them everywhere. And that is what makes it so sinister to find at a crime scene.
Because it blends in.
Yes, but also, there were no fingerprints on the guide. It was wiped completely clean.
Which proves intent.
As Poirot notes, an innocent man leaving a guide behind by mistake on a warm June evening would have left fingerprints. Sweaty hands, natural oils.
The absence of prints proves it was left there deliberately. It's the signature of the killer.
But the local police, they think they have it solved immediately.
Of course they do. They zero in on Alice Asher's estranged, violently alcoholic German husband, Franz Asher.
He's the classic, obvious suspect.
He has a history of showing up, making scenes, demanding money, and repeatedly threatening to bash her head in.
They even find him hiding in a truck on a railway siding. It looks like an open and shut case of domestic violence.
To the local police, yes, it looks totally straightforward. But Poirot looks at the psychology of the situation.
Right. When they interview Franz Asher, the man is a total wreck.
He's cringing, terrified, blustering one minute and whining the next.
And Poirot compares this miserable, shattered man to the tone of the ABC letter.
They don't match up at all.
Not even close. The letter was arrogant, confident, mocking. It was written with steady printed characters.
The psychological profiles are completely at odds. Franz Asher simply doesn't have the intellect, the steady nerve, or the audacity to write a letter challenging Hercule Poirot to a duel of wits.
Exactly.
I wonder, though, couldn't a smart local cop just argue that Asher hired someone to write the letter to throw them off the scent?
They could argue that, sure, but the timeline and the methodology make it highly improbable.
How so?
Well, a drunk like Asher doesn't have the foresight to orchestrate a clean, print-free crime scene while simultaneously orchestrating a targeted mail campaign against a famous private detective in London.
Right.
The stark contrast between the chaotic suspect and the meticulously clean crime scene is what tips Poirot off.
And the killer doesn't give them much time to debate it anyway. Before the Andover case can even cool down, a second letter arrives.
The warning points to B,
Bexhill-on-Sea, July 25th.
and the letter taunts Poirot again. It says, "First game to me, I think. The fun's only just beginning."
Such a chilling line. And the killer strikes again. Betty Barnard, a 23-year-old waitress who works at the Ginger Cat Cafe in Bexhill, is found dead on the beach.
But the methodology has changed entirely.
It has. She wasn't bludgeoned, she was strangled.
And the murder weapon was her own thick knitted silk belt.
And just like before, hidden carefully under her body is an ABC railway guide open to the Bexhill page.
The shift in victimology here is incredibly jarring.
You go from a nearly 60-year-old shopkeeper bludgeoned in a back street in Andover to a 23-year-old waitress strangled on a beach in Bexhill.
The socioeconomic status, the age, the location, the method of murder, everything is different.
The only things linking these two women are the letters sent to Poirot and the ABC guides left at the scenes.
Which completely baffles the local police. In Bexhill, the obvious suspect is Betty's fiancé, Donald Fraser.
Tell us about Donald.
Well, Betty was known to be a bit of a flirt. She enjoyed the attention of older men. And Donald is a quiet, intensely jealous young Scotsman.
But wait, isn't strangling usually considered a crime of passion? It's deeply personal, face-to-face. It makes perfect sense that the police would suspect the jealous fiancé.
That's precisely why it's such a brilliant misdirection by the killer.
Oh, I see.
Strangling someone with their own clothing usually implies a rage-fueled attack by someone close to the victim. Donald Fraser looks incredibly guilty.
The killer is basically weaponizing the standard assumptions of police work against them.
Exactly. He's creating crime scenes that naturally implicate the people closest to the victims.
That is so dark. And that brings us to a massive shift in the investigation.
Right, because the scale is now way too big for local police.
Scotland Yard steps in fully, and we're introduced to Inspector Crome.
Oh,
He's quite a character. He's younger, aloof, highly educated, and he clearly thinks he's vastly superior to Poirot.
He really does. Crome relies heavily on modern psychological jargon. He talks about megalomania and paranoia.
He views A.B.C. as a typical homicidal maniac killing at random, simply to make headlines and assert his personality.
Crome is a fascinating foil for Poirot. He represents the clinical, rigid application of 1930s textbook psychology.
He thinks Poirot is a relic.
He really does. But Poirot pushes back by asking the vital question, why these specific people?
And Crome just dismisses it as haphazard, like they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But Poirot insists that a madman is entirely logical within his own biased framework.
That's a great point. Even if the premise is insane, the execution follows a strict internal logic.
A serial killer doesn't just pick names out of a hat. There's a compulsion, a selection process, even if the police can't see it yet.
But wasn't Crone technically right to use psychological profiling? I mean, it was cutting edge for Scotland Yard at the time. Why does Christie set him up to look foolish compared to Poirot?
It's an interesting dynamic. Christie isn't necessarily mocking profiling itself. She's mocking the arrogance of rigidly applying generalized theories to individual human beings.
Trying to force the facts to fit the theory.
Exactly. Crome tries to fit the killer into a pre-existing academic box. Poirot looks at the specific anomalies of the case to build the box around the killer.
For instance, Poirot spots a glaring contradiction in the killer's methodology that Crome completely misses.
The magnanimous murderer concept.
Yes. Poirot points out that they're dealing with a magnanimous murderer, which just sounds impossible. A magnanimous serial killer.
It sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But think about the mechanics of what has actually happened so far.
Okay.
If A.B.C. simply wanted to kill people to satisfy a bloodlust, he could have committed the murders and just let Franz Asher hang for the Andover crime. And he could have let Donald Fraser hang for the Bexhill crime. Both men were perfectly positioned by circumstance to take the fall.
The police were ready to arrest them.
Exactly. But instead, the killer goes out of his way to write letters to Poirot and leave the railway guides. By proving it's a serial killer, A.B.C. actively saves the obvious suspects from the gallows.
That completely flips the script on how we view the killer's ego. He wants the credit so badly that he'll risk getting caught just to make sure no one else gets the glory for his work.
Or, as we'll find out later, there's an even more devious reason for linking the crimes.
Which is the real trick of the whole book.
Absolutely. So, because traditional police methods are failing, Poirot tries something radical.
He forms what he calls his special legion.
Which is such a dramatic name.
It is. He gathers the relatives and loved ones of the victims into one room.
Let's run through the roster. We have Mary Drower, the devoted niece of Alice Asher.
Megan Barnard, Betty's fiercely intelligent sister.
Donald Fraser, the grieving fiancé.
Franklin Clark, the brother of the third victim, who we'll get to in a moment.
And Thora Gray, a young woman who worked for that third victim.
Poirot basically builds his own private investigative task force out of the victims' families.
He sits them down and tells them that collectively they hold the key. He believes someone in that room knows something about the murderer, but they just don't know they know it yet.
I love this concept. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle of human memory.
It's a masterclass in psychological extraction. Poirot knows that when police interview witnesses, the witnesses filter their memories.
Right. They try to be helpful.
Exactly. They only tell the police what they think is important or relevant to a murder.
But Poirot just wants them to talk naturally.
He wants the mundane details, hoping the needle in the haystack will just fall out of the conversation.
And it works.
It absolutely works.
Through the conversations of this special legion, a tiny, seemingly irrelevant detail bubbles to the surface.
Someone remembers a man selling silk stockings.
Yes. A man selling stockings visited Mrs. Asher's neighborhood around the time of the murder.
And then another connection is made. A man selling the exact same brand of silk stockings was seen near the Bexhill crime scene.
Suddenly, this invisible phantom killer has a physical shadow.
Which brings us to a major structural shift in the novel.
A very modern shift, really.
It was revolutionary for its time. We suddenly leave Captain Hastings' first-person narrative, and we get these short, incredibly tense third-person chapters focused on a man named Alexander Bonaparte Cust.
Just the name alone, Alexander Bonaparte Cust?
It's quite the contrast.
It's got those grand imperial conqueror first names, and then just Cust.
The mundane surname.
He has the initials A.B.C., and the way Christie writes him is deeply unsettling.
Tell us about him.
He's a timid, shabby, nearsighted man who suffers from epilepsy and terrible blinding headaches. They're the result of a severe head injury he sustained fighting in World War I.
A broken man, really.
He rents a room in a dingy London boarding house run by a Mrs. Marbury, and his job is traveling around the country selling silk stockings door to door.
The psychological horror in Cust's chapters is profound, because he isn't portrayed as a scheming mastermind.
He's not Dr. Moriarty.
Not at all. He's portrayed as a tragic, deeply damaged, highly suggestible individual. He experiences terrifying blackouts where he loses hours or even days of time.
And as the story progresses, he reads the newspapers about the A.B.C. murders.
And he looks at his own itinerary.
He realizes he was in Andover on the day Mrs. Asher was killed. He realizes he was in Bexhill on the day Betty Barnard was strangled.
It's a waking nightmare for him.
He starts reading the descriptions of the suspect, and he looks in the mirror. He knows he has blackouts. He knows he has a history of trauma.
The reader gets to watch this poor, broken man genuinely begin to believe that he might be a homicidal lunatic acting out these crimes in a fugue state.
Christie is exploring the profound effects of trauma, gaslighting, and confirmation bias here.
Cust's own mind is weaponized against him. He has absolutely no memory of committing the crimes, but the circumstantial evidence presented to him by his own life is so strong that his fragile psyche begins to accept the guilt.
It's a terrifying exploration of how malleable human identity and memory can be when subjected to immense stress.
And that tension leads us right into the climax of the alphabetical slaughter.
C and D.
C is for Churston.
Down in Devon.
Right. Sir Carmichael Clark is found dead.
The third victim.
He's a wealthy former throat specialist who used his vast fortune to build an incredible collection of Chinese art. He's an older, distinguished gentleman.
And he's found on the grounds of his estate with his head brutally bashed in.
And as always, an ABC guide is placed face down by his body.
But there's a massive twist with the warning letter for Churston.
This is a crucial detail.
Up until now, Poirot received the letters with enough time to at least warn the local police, even if it didn't stop the crime. But the letter for Churston arrives too late.
The murder has already happened by the time Poirot opens the envelope.
Because the killer misaddressed it. He wrote White Horse Mansions instead of Poirot's actual address, White Haven Mansions.
Are we supposed to believe the meticulous killer just made a typo?
What, a seemingly simple clerical error by a madman is what the police assume.
But as Poirot knows, there are no simple errors in a pattern this deliberate.
The pressure on the police becomes astronomical at this point. The press is in an absolute frenzy. The whole country is terrified.
And then the fourth letter arrives.
D is for Doncaster, September 11th.
And Franklin Clark, the brother of the murdered Sir Carmichael, points out a horrifying complication.
September 11th is the day of the St. Leger horse race in Doncaster.
The town is going to be packed with tens of thousands of people.
The police draft in hundreds of officers, creating an absolute dragnet, watching everyone and everything.
The killer slips through anyway.
In a crowded cinema in Doncaster, while a film is playing, a man named George Earlsfield is stabbed to death in his seat.
ABC guide is dropped between his feet.
The killer struck in a dark room full of people and just walked away unseen.
The tension of that scene is incredible. The claustrophobia of the dark theater contrasting with the massive crowds outside at the races.
But here's the crazy part. George Earlsfield's name doesn't start with D.
The pattern is broken.
The police are thoroughly confused until they realize that sitting just 2 seats away from the victim was a man named Roger Emmanuel Downs.
The D for Downs.
And Mr. Downs was wearing the exact same type of woolen scarf as George Earlsfield. And they were of a similar build.
The immediate assumption by the authorities is that the killer, operating in the pitch black of the movie theater, simply misidentified his target and stabbed the wrong man.
It appears the meticulous killer has finally made a mistake.
And the net finally closes on Alexander Bonaparte Cust.
Because Cust was in Doncaster.
He was in that very cinema.
He leaves the theater, and when he gets back to his boarding house in London, he discovers a blood-stained knife in his coat pocket and blood on his sleeve.
The visceral horror of that moment.
Yeah. Finding another man's blood on your own clothing and having no memory of how it got there.
He's absolutely terrified. His worst fears are confirmed in his own mind.
He hides the knife, flees his lodgings, wanders for days without food or money, and eventually, completely broken and exhausted, he stumbles into the police station in Andover.
The site of the first murder.
Exactly, and he collapses. He essentially surrenders to his fate as the A.B.C. killer.
And the police are thrilled.
They think they've won.
They have the man. They search his room and find the typewriter used to write the letters.
They find a whole stash of new ABC guides hidden in his closet.
They find the bloody knife.
Inspector Crome is taking a victory lap, completely validated in his profiling.
But Poirot is deeply, deeply unsatisfied.
Poirot insists that the case is not the evidence. The case is the man.
Poirot interviews Cust, and he realizes that the psychological profile simply does not fit.
Yes, Cust is a damaged man, but he is not a mastermind capable of orchestrating this nationwide terror campaign.
But more importantly, Poirot uncovers a physical impossibility.
The alibi.
Cust actually has an ironclad alibi for the night of the Bexhill murder, the murder of Betty Barnard.
Cust was staying at a hotel in Eastbourne, 14 miles away.
And on the night of the murder, a very stubborn, very positive man named Mr. Strange insists that he and Cust played dominoes together in the hotel lounge until past midnight.
There is no way Cust could have left the hotel, traveled 14 miles to Bexhill, strangled Betty Barnard on the beach, and returned undetected.
So it's impossible.
Wait, so if he didn't kill Betty Barnard, but his typewriter wrote the letters, what does that mean?
It's the thread that Poirot pulls to unravel the entire magnificent deception.
If Cust didn't commit the Bexhill murder, then he didn't commit any of them.
Exactly. The letters, the guides, the typewriter, they were all planted to frame him.
Which means the real killer is still out there, and he's orchestrated one of the most elaborate misdirections in the history of crime.
Poirot gathers everyone together for the final reveal, and he explains his brilliant deduction using an analogy.
The pincushion analogy.
Yes. He asks, when do you notice a pin least? When it is in a pincushion.
When do you notice an individual murder least? when it is one of a series of related murders.
It's a stunning paradigm shift. Poirot realizes that the alphabetical premise was a smokescreen.
The killer didn't want to kill an A, a B, a C, and a D.
The A, B, and D murders were completely fake serial killings. They were camouflage designed solely to hide the real murder.
The only murder that actually mattered, the C murder, Sir Carmichael Clark.
So we have to look at who benefits from the death of the immensely wealthy Sir Carmichael Clark,
His younger brother, Franklin Clark.
the very man who helped Poirot form the Special Legion.
The man who sat in the room with them, acting like a grieving brother, eager for justice.
The audacity of Franklin Clark is breathtaking. He wanted his brother's massive fortune.
But Sir Carmichael's wife was dying. If she died first, Sir Carmichael might remarry or leave his fortune to someone else.
Franklin needed his brother dead now, before the inheritance could be complicated.
But he knew that as the sole heir, he would be the absolute prime suspect.
So he had to invent a homicidal maniac to take the blame.
The mechanics of how he pulled this off are chilling.
Franklin was sitting in a cafe in London, plotting how to kill his brother, when he happened to meet the pathetic, rambling Mr. Cust.
He learned Cust's initials, A.B.C.
He learned about Cust's epilepsy and memory loss.
And he decided to use him as a stalking horse.
Franklin got Cust a fake job selling stockings. He literally typed up the itineraries and sent Cust to Andover, to Bexhill, to Churston, and to Doncaster.
And then Franklin followed him.
Franklin Clark manipulated every single detail.
He killed Mrs. Asher in Andover simply because her name was above a shop and she was an easy target.
But the Bexhill murder of Betty Barnard is where his plan required true cunning.
He killed Betty a day early.
That's why Cust has the alibi of playing dominoes. Franklin killed her before Cust even arrived in the area.
But the police assumed the time of death fit the serial killer narrative.
And the mistake with the Churston letter? That wasn't a mistake at all.
Franklin purposefully misaddressed the warning letter to Poirot to Whitehorse Mansions instead of Whitehaven.
He needed the police to know the murder was part of the A.B.C. series, but he couldn't risk them arriving in time to actually save his brother.
He manipulated the mail to buy himself the window he needed to bash his own brother's head in.
And finally, Doncaster. Franklin Clark didn't care who he killed in that cinema.
George Earlsfield was just collateral damage.
Franklin just needed a dead body near Cust so he could plant the bloody knife in Cust's pocket during the confusion.
The mistake of killing a man whose name didn't start with D was just another layer of calculated chaos to make the madman theory look more authentic.
But Franklin Clark made one tiny, fatal error.
In his arrogance, he left his own fingerprint on the typewriter he gave to Cust.
He thought he was untouchable because he was playing the role of the helpful, grieving relative.
When Poirot exposes him, Clark tries to laugh it off and then tries to shoot his way out.
But Poirot has already had his gun emptied.
The final confrontation is fascinating because Poirot doesn't just condemn Clark for the murders, he delivers a very specific, deeply cutting insult.
He looks at this wealthy, arrogant, sporting Englishman and tells him that his crime was not sporting and not an English crime.
Clark is furious at that.
But Poirot is absolutely right. To catch a vulnerable, sick man in a trap, to gaslight him into believing he's a monster, and to let him face the hangman, that's an act of supreme cowardice.
It violates every code of fair play that men like Franklin Clark claim to hold dear.
Which brings us to the broader meta-context and literary impact of the novel.
Because the A.B.C. Murders wasn't just a clever book, it was a cultural event.
Charles Osborne's essay details how the novel was serialized in the Daily Express in 1935.
Think about what reading a serialized mystery in 1935 actually felt like for the British public. It was a massive interactive phenomenon.
The newspaper actually published columns of readers' guesses alongside the chapters, challenging the public to beat Poirot to the solution.
It was like early true crime sleuthing, but with fiction. The whole country was trying to figure out the alphabetical pattern week by week.
And its legacy is undeniable. Osborne notes that this book heavily influenced the entire mystery genre.
Other writers essentially plagiarized the concept.
He specifically mentions Ellery Queen's Cat of Many Tails as heavily leaning on Christie's plot.
Christie set the absolute gold standard for the hiding a specific murder inside a random serial killer spree trope.
Think about how many times you've seen that plot device in movies or read it in modern thrillers since then.
It all traces back to this book. Christie brilliantly exploited the human brain's desire to find patterns.
We want things to make sense. If we see A, B, and C, our brain automatically expects D.
Franklin Clark used that psychological quirk as a weapon of misdirection, and Christie used it to misdirect the reader.
It's a testament to her profound understanding of psychology, not just of her characters, but of her audience.
She knows we'll look at the alphabet and the railway guides and be so blinded by the pattern that we won't look at the inheritance money.
We've been on an incredible journey today.
We really have. We started with a boastful, taunting letter. We traveled through a terrifying string of seemingly random alphabetical killings across England.
We witnessed the tragic, cruel manipulation of an innocent, broken man.
And it all culminated in Hercule Poirot piercing through the psychological smokescreen to reveal a motive as old as time.
Read.
You've just learned how to deconstruct an absolute masterclass in misdirection. The lesson here is profound.
Whenever a narrative, whether it's in fiction, in the news, or in your own life, seems almost too perfectly patterned, too neat and tidy, it's time to step back.
You have to stop looking at the pattern itself and ask the hard question.
Who benefits from the existence of this pattern?
And as we leave you today, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over on your own. It builds on the tragic character of Mr. Cust.
We talked about his immense, terrifying suggestibility.
Here was a man who was presented with circumstantial evidence of his own guilt. And because of his own deep insecurities, his trauma, and his memory gaps, his brain actively filled in the blanks to convince him that he was, in fact, a monster.
It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about ourselves.
How solid is our own memory? We rely on it as the bedrock of our identity.
But if the world presented you with perfect, irrefutable proof of something you absolutely did not do, how long would it take for your own mind to betray you?
How long would it take for the seed of doubt to grow until you finally accepted the lie as your own truth?
It's a chilling thought.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the A.B.C. Murders book by Agatha Christie. Keep questioning the patterns, and we'll see you next time.